All right, and so that is a picture of the very first time that our division ever had 3 women pilots fly together. Nobody even realized it was happening. If you look out the window, it's pitch black out there. We were doing the red-eye flight from Las Vegas to St. Louis, and yeah, when I started, there was maybe 175 pilots in the division, and there was just 1 female pilot. And by the time I left there, I think we had 4. So it does happen once in a while. So there is my direct email address, and if you haven't already linked in with me, please link in on LinkedIn. I share information every day, and I see some pilot jobs out there I try to share, so please link in with me, and also ask questions today. And if you don't want to ask questions in front of everybody else, you can go ahead and contact me elsewhere. So if you need this, holler at me. Otherwise, I'm going to take the PowerPoint off and stop sharing my screen for just a second.
So we had a few questions come in so far. The most recent was that at the very end, like the last minute or 2 of the video, the audio got a little choppy. So people were just wondering if there was a link to that video that you could provide so we could watch it again later.
Yep, I will. So are you going to, can I put it on your Facebook page or something, or?
Yeah, you can post it on Facebook, or if you send it to me right now, I can copy it into I think I can chat it to everybody if you even type it in. Either way, whatever's easiest.
Yeah, I'll email it to you. Unfortunately, it's a huge uploads. If I do that, then you won't be able to finish up the webinar.
But we did get a thank you. So people had said that this is definitely motivation on rough days, and a few other people thanked you for your presentation. There was a question at the beginning when you were running through the various numbers of people who have their ATP. Someone was just asking how you calculated those. I was wondering, did you get those off the Excel spreadsheets on FAA.gov?
Yep, I did. I rounded them off, but yeah, those are the approximate numbers, and you can get those off the FAA website.
Okay, excellent. There's, I say that all the time to my students too. It's amazing how much information is on FAA.gov, and you don't even know to look for it until you stumble across it.
And they actually have a spreadsheet. So if you go in there and look down below, you can see all the different tabs. They actually have women pilots. So they finally are tracking us out there separately.
Right. Yeah. And those, the spreadsheet you were looking at, those were just FAA certificates in the United States, the numbers you gave, right?
They are. Yeah. And so when you say licensed pilots, it's all pilots, sport, aviation, everything is kind of lumped in there. But that's where we draw our future pilots from. We all start off as private pilots, so it's kind of an index and a key to see the momentum. And over the years, our pilot numbers have gone down and down. Lots of reasons. We can do a whole webinar on that. But the good news for all of you out there is it's going to help you. If there's less pilots out there, you have a better shot.
Silver lining.
Exactly.
Yeah. So please keep the questions coming in. I have a few more here to go through. So if you have any questions you've just thought of, please feel free to put them in the questions box, and I'll pass them along to Erika. The next question I got was, how hard is it to change from one career in aviation to another? For example, transitioning over to cargo.
So I've been watching right now a lot of my airline pilot friends interested in coming back into business aviation. Once again, I hate to keep saying this, but it's that networking connection. Continuing on with that as you move through your career in different segments of it. So most of the pilots that end up like at FedEx, UPS, and stuff, they're happy up there. There's a lot of intermediates like Atlas Air. They do a different type of flying. It's the around the world kind of flying. So I think, if you're not sure and you want to try it, I don't think you'd have any trouble going into the cargo world and trying it for a while and then stepping out into anything else. Every single hour you earn, especially the heavy iron like that, you can't go wrong. If you decide you don't like that and you want to come back into the passenger world, maybe see a little bit more daylight, you would have no problem. It would just propel you that much further as far as qualifications go. So yeah, most of my students that come in just don't realize how many different segments of aviation are. They come in with the idea they want to be airline pilots, And there really are truly, a variety of different pathways that you can take.
This is true. Yeah, people they see what's the most obvious and they don't realize just the many things out there. That so many options. Like you said, some do better at some times, and others kind of are chugging along at other times.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So your next question is, has the pay been equal for you versus the men pilots?
The pay.
Yeah, the pay, the salary.
All right, so that's one good thing about union is that your pay is public when you make it up to there. But there was a huge discrepancy in business aviation when I first started. The situation I was on is that I was a salaried employee, and so they would have me working in the office, which none of my male cohorts ever had to do. So I would work all day and then fly at night and brush up against duty time limitations all the time. So they definitely got a good deal with me as far as, usage of a human being. So salary, but you know what the irony is that it worked great for me because when my company needed a pilot, they would choose me because they're already paying a salaried position. So, all the other pilots are laughing at me because I'm getting paid less than them, but I earned up all my hours and then got the heck out of there. So, use it to your advantage. If you see that kind of discrimination, see what you can do to turn it around. That's the only thing I could do. It was so frustrating. I don't exaggerate. I earned 50% less than the next person, and I had more time, more hours, more experience, and they were walking in the door getting higher salaries and only having to obviously work on their days that they flew. So, it still exists out there. That's the only good thing though is when you come up into the more regulated world, even the larger corporate flight departments, they all have their pay is published, and there's, the only other discrimination you can kind of see is if you are paid, if there's an hourly rate, maybe they just don't fly you as much as everybody else. There's lots of different ways to discriminate, and but if you run into that, you let me know, and I'll see what we can do to get you around it.
Excellent. Yeah, use all the help we can get here. So you have a bunch of comments here. So Chloe thanked you and said that you're an inspiration. I have not gotten to your book yet, but it's on the to-do list, the summer reading list for sure. But a few questions came up about your book. Someone said they just started it and they're very much enjoying it, and thanking you for the book and for doing tonight. Somebody else just asked, have your daughters read your book? And they're asking about your family relationships here.
Yeah, so the book is a whole other bag of tricks, and so I don't always talk about the book when we have a general audience like this. It's a whole other category, but yes, my older daughter has read the book and my younger one is getting close to reading it. So they're now teenagers and driving. Oh yeah, 15 and a 17-year-old now, and so if you have read the book, I won't do any spoiler alerts, but when you start off flying and you're 17, 18 years old, 19, you don't think ahead and think someday you're going to be married with kids, and you just don't maybe picture yourself. I certainly didn't, but so you don't look at your partner as somebody that needs to understand your job, and then maybe that your partner would be the one who's going to be home with the kids. So the book is there for you to have a more encompassing idea of all the family pressures that are put on women. Flying is hard for men and women, but whether you like it or not, women still are the ones that do all the child rearing if you decide to do the full family, have all the human experiences of all that. So it's always going to be an extra challenge for women, and the book is just one example of what can happen and how you can get out of a tough situation.
That's true. These things happen. That's good advice. Somebody else just said they read your book last year while in COVID shutdown, loved it. Regarding being a female in a male-dominated industry, do you have any recommendations on dealing with male egos? I can't imagine male egos, jokes, etc., while pursuing a dream career in aviation? Referencing your book and the pictures your coworkers placed around the plane, I have experienced similar situations.
Yeah, you can't make it through this industry without some misogyny. You're going to run across it. And when that happens, the first thing I want you all to do is to look at this person and realize they're a jerk in general. You'll see and notice that, you know, misogyny maybe comes with the package and that's how it manifests itself, but these people are just have no emotional intelligence whatsoever. And you'll also find that your male cohorts will be the first to help you out. The problem is, you know, how do you deal with it, especially in a 2-cockpit crew and you've got that jerk sitting next to you? How do you get through that day? It is hard, you know, especially after you've worked so hard and you've been so professional in your career. You know, somebody is treating you like this because of a chromosome, right? Definitely having a sense of humor, but if it gets to the point where it's interfering with your job and your safety, I recommend reaching out to your peers. You know, it's hard and every situation is so different, so it's hard to give a blanket answer, but there are people out there that will help you. And most airlines, even the corporate flight departments have, usually it is an anonymous way for you to say, I don't want to fly with this person. And the airlines have you know, these lists where they say that these people shouldn't be paired together. Knock on wood, I never needed to use it, but it was nice to know that there is a way for you to not fly with somebody. You know, when you get to these big airlines, generally you have lots of options. Most of the times you walk in the cockpit, you don't know who you're flying with. You know, the real trouble comes in corporate aviation, when you are flying with the same person every single day. It's definitely part of the thought process about taking that job, making sure you know who you're flying with, and truly understanding, you know, the dynamics of what you're dealing with. You're sitting next to somebody for 8 hours, and then you have a layover, and you usually go out to dinner with that person, and you know, especially if you have a couple days, you're out hanging out with each other. So it's really important that you like the person that you're flying with, and that there's mutual respect there. So they're just interviewing you, you're interviewing them, because that's a huge, you know, life insertion into somebody else's life when you're crewed with another person. So yeah, in every situation is so different. So, but if you need help, just let me know. I'll help you out.
Excellent. I'm sure many people will be interested in speaking to you because unfortunately these things happen quite a bit here. You have, just actually following up on what you just spoke about, you have a comment here. Aisha, she says she does LinkedIn with you and she enjoys your enthusiasm and humor and thanks you for sharing your experiences. She has about 40 hours in GA in an Arrow and wants to fly for recreational purposes. She was hoping to island hop, but wish all women bright skies and success in whatever they dream. And the question is, you mentioned emotional intelligence in coworkers. What about the extent of emotional intelligence on higher levels of an organization? How do they address misogyny in their workplace? And do you feel that trickles down to pilots?
Absolutely. Corporate culture is everything. You can see it happen. You can see it shift and change. You know, I can only speak for one airline, and you know, watching within a smaller segment, it takes time. I think that enough women have come through now that the novelty's worn off. People get tired of listening to a misogynist, you know, rant about it. So that edge is kind of off of it. It's sad when it does make it up into upper management. You know, it still happens. And once again, that's one of the things that you need to kind of get a feel for with corporate culture. And the best way to do that is contact the other people in that flight department, and not even just the pilots. You know, if you can link in with their schedulers and their dispatchers, and you know, just have a conversation with them and just say, hey, I'm thinking about working here. What might that look like? And just start getting a feel for if people are happy or if they're angry, or you know, what their complaints are. There's no perfect flight department, and there's always somebody complaining. So, you know, you have to pick what you want. You know, when early in my career, I wanted a job where I was flying all the time. But there was people with families in that flight department. They were just miserable because they were getting called out at 3 o'clock in the morning and, you know, at the last minute. So what makes you happy now in that flight department is going to change probably. So when you start getting that feeling where it's not fitting you, that's when you need to step back and say, okay, what what do I need to change here, and what can I do that? And there are so many different flight departments out there. You can find your happiness. So don't stick in a job that you're not happy with, because it becomes a safety issue. If you are not enthusiastic and thriving there, fatigue and bad attitude is not a good mix in the cockpit. So really pay attention to yourself and make the change if you feel it.
So true, so true. You have a lot more great questions here, but just before we move on from the topic of the book, at least for now, we can always come back to it. But someone just asking if you could please give a plug for your book, the title, and where you can buy a copy.
Oh, yeah. So it's on Amazon. A lot of the bookstores carry it. If not, you can just order it. There's a Kindle version, and there's also an audio version. My book club kind of turned me on to the audio version of it. I'd never listened to one before, so just recently they're like, you need to put your book on audio. So yeah, so I've got all three choices out there, and a chick in the cockpit, and you can find me on social media through my website. You can order the book too. And if you want an autograph, I can see if I have a sticker. Just email me, and I can fill out. I have a little sticker that I can sign and endorse to you, and you can put it on the inside cover of your book. So if you want a copy of an autograph, just email me, and I'll get a sticker out to you. You can just stick it in the book.
That's so sweet, but no endorsement to Solo.
What's that?
No endorsement to Solo, just an autograph. No endorsements to Solo.
No endorsements, no.
That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Okay, so you have a multi-part question here. Before COVID, was it competitive to get a pilot job?
So it's always competitive, even when we have a pilot shortage. But before COVID was happening, and because I'm in business aviation, we had a dire need for pilots. And I know people laugh at that now because we've got pilots on furlough, but I watched our corporate flight departments putting out ads, and they 8 weeks later still hadn't filled the position. So that's how quickly it can change. So it changed for the worse, but it can also change for the better just that quickly. So even during a pilot shortage, it's not like we don't have any competition. You still have competition, and the Pilot Records Act has changed a lot. So if you have any kind of dings on your record, it's going to follow you through your whole career. You can still work your way through it, but a lot of things have changed as far as the competition goes. A lot of people ask me about needing a college degree. Because I teach at college, I'm like, please get one, even if it's not in aviation. Truly, they really don't. I found that they don't care what your degree is in. In here, I teach at an aviation school, but as long as you have one, the company wants to see that you can focus and get something done. Jump through the hoops of getting through college, and I know it's hard, but there's so many options out there. You can take this, online classes. I've been teaching for the last year online. It's not perfect, but we get the job done. There are choices out there, and so maybe while you're getting your CFI, you can take a few college classes to get that degree done. Corporate aviation doesn't require it as much, but when we're talking about competition, I guarantee you that person with the degree is still going to get looked at first. And then when you get up to the airline world, I know it says they don't require a degree, especially when we have a shortage of pilots, but the reality is most everybody, unless you're coming maybe out of the military with a lot of military time, I'd say across the board, they're going to require that other degree.
I have to say I agree with you, because I also teach at an aviation college, way off in New York City though, so not a competitor or anything exactly. But I completely agree about the college degree, because while I do what you do in the classroom, I get nervous, like what happened to you, God forbid, getting hit by a drunk driver. All we need is one bad day, and when you put all your eggs in one basket, you kind of limit your options. So I completely agree with you about the importance of a college degree, but don't feel like it has to be in aviation. I have bachelor's through doctorate, and I never studied that. You know, I never studied aviation in school.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of my students, they think that they have to have an aviation degree. They want to be pilots. So, yeah, I try to take that off and say, what's your second favorite thing to do? And maybe study that. And, as you work your way towards the cockpit, if you really decide that this is what you want to do, I really hope that you are able to go work at an airport, a general aviation airport, and just learn both sides of the cockpit door. Do some dispatching. I worked in the maintenance department for a few years at Elliott, and I learned a lot about that. And I processed work orders, and I worked in accounting for a while. I did dispatching. So at the time, I hated it because I wanted to be flying. But I'm so glad I had those experiences, because now I'm able to say I've got all these experiences. So what else can I do? I can still do something in aviation, but maybe not exactly what I wanted to be doing. So, yeah, having that broad background of education is going to help you no matter what. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So more questions still coming in, which is excellent. The next question was actually coming off the last question. Would you please elaborate more on the differences between cargo and passenger flying?
Yeah. So, if and there's a lot of intermediate too for cargo. At night, well, here's an example. It's a twofold example. So I was flying air ambulance. I got called out in the middle of the night. I was in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and in a blinding blizzard. And I'm out on the ramp, and up poles next to me is a 182, and he's flying cargo, but he was flying U.S. mail, and I mean contracts change. And he was actually out there spraying Pam cooking spray on his propellers for de-icing and anti-icing. Okay, so I had to go talk to this guy because I'm like, oh, please, don't. But he had been doing this job, this contract job, for like 8 years and loved it. He was flying cargo at night, did one route. I'm not sure what he was being paid, but he does this, he did it like 4 nights a week, but it made enough money that's all he did, and loved it. So there's a lot of in between for cargo. I flew when I was flying for a charter company. At night, the airlines would need to get an airplane part from one part of the country to the other, and they didn't have their own flights flying. So they would call a charter company and say, hey, we need to move our mechanics and these parts to Detroit. And so I would go over to Minneapolis and pick up mechanics and their parts, and then I would fly them to where they needed to go. Like we go off to Detroit in the middle of the night. So that, we're flying cargo and people at the same time. It wasn't necessarily scheduled. These were all pop-up kind of stuff. But there's also all these little charter companies out there that fly oddball things, bank records, and a lot of it's changed now that everything's electronic, but there's still oddball things that get shipped around at night. And then as you move up then into the cargo world, you're at a different part of the airport. Like if you drive into Denver International Airport, as you're coming in, you'll see on the right side of the airport, like I said, be the south side of the airport, there's the cargo ramp. It's just cargo airplanes over there, no passengers. It's, different kind of requirements for security, and and you don't have to worry about pleasing passengers back there. You aren't waiting for a connecting flight to come in. It's just a different environment. You're much more on your own, and a little bit less structure over there. And then learning how to do things like weight and balance. Somebody else is loading your airplane, but carrying hazardous materials you have to be educated on. Yeah, a little more complicated weight and balance. Yeah, we've seen in the industry what happens when those cargo, the cargo shifts, and so yeah, a little different talent, but still same basic core skills. But most of those airplanes are flying at night. They get loaded up in the evening. At least when you first start working, you're going to get all those night flying, shifts. But as you move up, there's lots of daytime flying, and the irony is the cargo pilots, like the big, UPS, FedEx, they actually make more as senior captains than you do at the passenger world.
Most people would be shocked by that. It's true.
Yeah,
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 that's a great job.
yeah.
It's it's interesting you touched upon this because someone was asking, about other options to get up to your 1,500 hours instead of CFIing, and there are a lot of options out there. But some of the stuff you touched on, like back in my day, where we would do the single pilot instrument flying at night, flying the canceled checks and all that around, that's some pretty hard flying. And these are great pilots, and I think that it's important to note that even if you don't CFI and you're having another option to build your hours, not all hours are created equal. So that person who was flying the checks, he's got a whole different skill level, or she has a whole different skill level than the person who built their time, doing the $100 hamburger, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had to laugh. I actually had a pilot who came from a wealthy family, and they paid for him to just fly an airplane around in Southern California. And I was doing a trip in the 727. I was the captain. We were coming back from Cancun to Minneapolis. And of course, it's snowing in Minneapolis and down to minimums. And it was his turn to fly. And we're getting closer, and he's really listening to the ATIS. And he's like, this is awesome. I get to shoot an approach to minimums. I've never done that. And we have 173 people behind us, and he'd never actually flown an approach to minimums. And my instinct is, oh my God, I'm not letting this guy fly. But I'd flown with him for, the last week, and he was doing a good job. And I asked him, I'm like, do you feel comfortable with this? It was a good crosswind, and there about every third airplane was having to go missed approach, and he's like, no, I'm ready for it. And I'm like, all right. So I followed along with him, and he did an awesome job, and had never done this in the real world before. So I'm sure the passengers would freak out to know that he'd never done it. So, but yeah, it's that's the irony, is the crappy jobs that you're doing when you first learn how to fly are the hardest. If you can fly, because I was flying for the Red Cross single engine at night in Minnesota by myself, going into these unattended airports, and I look back now, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I'm here. But it makes you a good pilot. You're young and bold, and throw in some knowledge and some training there, and it makes you a good pilot. So I know the jobs may look crappy, but I just saw a posting for Cape Air. They wanted 500 hours total time, commercial multi-instrument, but 500 hours to get in the right seat at a carrier. They're out there, and they're out there right now, even during this horrible COVID thing. So, but a lot of it, most of it's word of mouth. My flight departments, they hardly ever have to post a job. They'll just say, hey, we need a first officer on our Citation 550. Do you know anybody? I'm like, heck yeah, I know lots of people. So those things never even make it to the posting boards. So yeah, we keep harping on the connections, but it really is important to make those.
Yeah, following up on what you said, you had some questions here about networking, because of course in the time of COVID, it's a little difficult, or it's changed anyway. So how have you been networking over the past year?
Well, so I unintentionally, I'll back up real quick. I hated social media, okay? So I used Facebook. My dad lives up in northern Minnesota, so I used it to post pictures and stuff. And so then I wrote my book. And I did the old-fashioned route. I pitched to an agent, and then the agent pitched to a publisher. And I went through that whole, thing where you had to write a book proposal and a query, and it took longer than writing the book. So I started, because I didn't like social media, I'm like, all right, how can I use this to my benefit and find the power in it? And it truly is amazing if you use social media in the right way. So I prefer LinkedIn. It's just a slightly more professional. So I started using it wisely. Long story, but now I have almost 500,000 followers on LinkedIn. So it was just a slow progression, and it started off as a requirement from my agent. He's like, you need a platform. I'm like, all right. And so, I researched it. I took a lot of classes on social media, understanding it, how it works, how to make those better connections. So that's a little different than what I'm asking of you. But you get to benefit off of those connections that I've made. So, I'm every day I'm putting my, social media out there and trying to research and see what's going on in the world. What's the condition of our economy? What, in business aviation, what in general, what are pilots struggling with? So I've just, have to keep my finger on the pulse, and because of that, I can help you network as well. So you get to use that benefit. But just doing what we're doing tonight, that's it. I mean, it's not that hard. I know at least I can't see everybody's names on here, but when you get on LinkedIn or any kind of platform like that, a lot of times we'll just sit back and observe and just kind of watch, and that's fine to do. But it's important for you to just pay attention to finding those people in your local area, and just, you're not bothering them, but just drop them a note. Just say, hey, I'm a student pilot, and just ask them, like, where did you get your first job? How did you get your first job? And you'll be amazed. These are pilots. Come on, all I want to do is talk about flying, and you'll be amazed at if they're willing to help you. So especially if you can find somebody, excuse me, in the local area who can kind of tell you in that area what kind of air ambulance companies are active, and what kind of cargo flying is available. You'll be surprised at who will step up and help you out.
This is true, and you have all the membership of the 99 backing you as well. So we all know somebody, and
Yeah.
just have to reach out. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay, so some more questions here. So people had asked, is it ever really too late to become a pilot? Can you start in your 40s?
So I don't know what it is about COVID, but I've gotten probably no less than 50 emails with that question.
Oh boy.
And so here's my example. I have a friend that I previously flew with, and he had never flown an airplane until he was 39 years old. That's still pretty young, right? But never flown an airplane. And within 2 years, he was sitting in a 727. And then a few years after that, he went into the corporate world and was flying a Gulfstream, captain on a Gulfstream. So I have probably, I don't know, 7, 8 people that I know that didn't even start flying until their 40s, and then are now flying professionally. So there's a lot of opportunity in business aviation. You have to retire when you're 65 at the airlines, but you can continue flying in business aviation. So you have to stay healthy. As pilots, it gets hard. You go to all the great restaurants. That's all you do is on layovers, you eat. And ask any pilot about what restaurants are at which city, and they all know. But there's a lot of opportunities even outside that age range, and people are healthier. They've stayed healthier longer, and medicine has changed, and so you have an opportunity for a longer career if you want it. Even the guys that are coming out of the airlines, and it'll be interesting to see now, because a lot of people took early retirement, and the requirement was you could retire as early as 50 as long as you had 10 years in with the company, and a lot of people took it. When the outbreak happened, we just didn't know. Nobody knew. So they were given an opportunity for a sweet retirement deal, so they took it. But it'll be interesting to see if some of those people decide to come back into business aviation. So yeah, we'll kind of keep an eye on it, and I'll write an article for you in a few months.
Oh, excellent. Oh, looking forward to that. We had a few questions going all the way back on you to when you started. Did you have to deal with nerves when you first started up your flight training, like with your solo or cross countries or any of that?
Yes. Short answer is yes. And so one of the things that when I look back on why we don't have more women in aviation, I think one of the things that we need to work on is inspiring confidence in younger women. And we all need, as pilots, an ego, in a good way though. And that a lot of times doesn't get developed in women till later. But you have to have that confidence that you can get out of any emergency. If you're questioning yourself or doubtful, you're not going to thrive as a pilot. It'll just that stress and worry will wear you down. So helping other women build up that self-confidence is super important. That comes with studying. I'm sorry, you gotta know your stuff. So going above and beyond, not just knowing the very basics, but studying extra hard and understanding everything that's happening around you. Even as a private pilot, understand what's happening under that engine. We don't teach our students the basics of a piston engine airplane. So you can even go on YouTube and take a 30-minute, just look at a 30-minute video and understand what's happening in a piston engine, so that when you turn on your carb heat, you understand what's happening. When you, if you lose your alternator while you're flying, what's going to happen? That those little things that you don't think matter, they add up to self-confidence. So not just the straight line focus of flying an airplane, but all those little peripheral things about inspiring confidence and the ability to get your mission done in the cockpit are super important. So, but given that, absolutely, every time I have a check ride, every time you go in the simulator. So I want you to remember this, because someday if you go to the airlines or go to the business aviation, you're going to have to go into the simulator for the first time. But I want you to walk in there and smell the simulator, because it is full of years of people in stress and sweat and nerves. And it's a simulator. It's on the ground. It's not going anywhere. Aviation is it's a stressful environment. You can't get around it. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to put that stress someplace else. Learn how to shed it. Learn how to deal with it. It's your own self-talk that's going to make that difference. You're the one that's going to inspire your own confidence, and it's a tough process to get there, but knowledge will translate into skills, and confidence follows through with that. So yeah, you'll have those check ride days, and you're just like stomach acid all day long, and taking a deep breath, something as simple as that before you begin, and viewing the scene with a sense of humor, and knowing you are going to make a mistake. There's not a perfect check ride. There's not a perfect sim session. There's not. So, and especially when you're first learning how to fly, you are going to start just obsessing about those mistakes that you made. And, you lay in bed at night going, oh my God, that was such a crappy landing. And, but turn it on itself and say, what can I do to make that not happen again? What can I do? So you're going to make mistakes, and I hate seeing pilots step out because they're just so dogged down by their concern about that perfection. The great thing about aviation is that you're allowed to make a series of mistakes within a circle of safety. So when you're a student pilot, you got to make sure that you're defined on what limits you can reach on that circle of safety. And we're all here to help you get your confidence and knowledge, and it's all out there. Yeah, there's even a bunch of free online private pilot ground schools out there right now. COVID inspired a lot of people to put this out there, and it's good training. So I hope I don't put myself out of a job, but the resources that are out there.
No, I think we're getting more and more interest, being raised here, and I'm glad about all the things you said about gaining that confidence, because it's so true, and knowing that none of us are perfect. And what really drives me crazy, we were talking before about flight instructors, and the flight instructor who will really beat up a student who's having a bad day. You get those kind of circumstances coming together, and somebody who would have had a fantastic career ahead of them, they end up walking away, and that's just always so disappointing.
Yep, and I see way too much. It's just it is heartbreaking, and that flight instructor who is doesn't want to be there, he's just trying to get on to the next job,
Yeah.
can change the path of the next person. So please, if you're having a bad day or a bad flight instructor, there are others out there. Don't feel bad about moving on to somebody else.
That's there's actually a question here too about how to pick a good flight school, and I say all the time to my students, I mean, yeah, you're students, but you're also customers, and you're writing a pretty big check here that a lot of people would be very grateful to cash. So that really puts you in the pilot seat, no pun intended. If anyone's interested in more, only because we've got about 20 minutes left here, but I ran my mouth for about an hour and a half back in September. We have the first Wednesday webinars, and I did do a whole topic of how to pick a flight school. It just, especially for new students who have no frame of reference, you need to be an educated consumer. So Erika, I was just wondering, because you were asked the question here by a couple people, any tips you have on how to pick a good school? And also, I think what's even more important than a good school is a good flight instructor, because you have a great school with a lousy CFI, or a great CFI at a lousy school, and it makes all the difference.
Right, right. And then you're always having to deal with some flight schools where the maintenance is terrible. But just like you said, you just don't know. There's no benchmark to start from. So it depends on where you are, what part of the country, but I kid you not, just hanging out at that flight school for a day, just go in and get your information and then just say, hey, can I just sit and watch the airplanes land for a while? And just watch the pilots and the flight instructors. Are the flight instructors, when they're hanging out and laughing, are they picking on a student? Were they laughing about their last student, or are they just, having a good time? Is there a positive feeling in there? I know all you girls get that. We know when you walk in someplace, just listen to that energy, feel that energy. Even at a great flight school, you're going to have one or two bad apples in there. So, as far as that goes, but then the second side is that maintenance. There's a lot of flight schools that just, man, they've got everything duct taped together, and they're pencil whipping the maintenance logbooks. The irony of operating crappy airplanes is that you really learn about systems really fast. So if something's on MEL, you learn that system really well. Making sure that you go in and you start understanding what maintenance logbooks look like, and looking at the write-ups and seeing how the mechanics are signing it off. Is it the same thing over and over, and the mechanics are just kind of signing it off, or are they taking care of it? Are they really trying to fix the problem? So there's a whole variety of things that you're looking for. You can look at social media, you can look at all the write-ups and what people say about it, and then sit at the airport, and as that pilot walks out of the door and you're sitting in the parking lot, just go up and say, hey, I have a question for you. I'm thinking about taking flight training here. What do you think? And they'll tell you, oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
So there's enough competitions out there at most of the airports that you don't have to deal with a crappy flight school. I'm in the Denver area, so that's probably skewed. We have several different airports and flight departments and training schools. So a competition makes everybody better. So yeah, almost everybody here in the Denver area, they're all good flight schools. And I have several flight instructors that I would recommend. So if you're in the area, I'll let you know some good ones. So, and if you're not, just let me know, and I'll track it down. I'll see if there's any anybody that's recommended for that area.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right on all points. You got a couple questions here just about you personally. One was, how long did you fly as a captain for Champion?
So, okay, so I made it up to captain when I was 30 years old, and then 9/11 happened. And thankfully, I had kept my currency in all 3 seats. So as the furloughs came along, I got bumped back to first officer, and then I got bumped back to flight engineer. I'd fly a couple of trips here, then there, and then captain. So I was still in the captain seat for 5 years.
Okay, excellent. And then the next one was, someone wrote, being in the middle of medical tests at the moment, that could end up ending my career as a pilot. How did you deal with the emotional side of having to find another path after your accident?
Yeah, no, I haven't dealt with it. There's no easy way through. I mean, at some point you just have to just say, okay, there's some things I just can't change, right? And if I could do an ear transplant or something, I would do it. So you kind of go through this denial, and that it's going to get fixed, and that I'm going to find a way through it. But at some point, you just got to say, all right. So here's my reality. What else can I do to find my happiness? It's not an easy answer. And for each person, it's going to be different. So for me, I'm still in aviation. I'm still kind of oscillating through what I'm going to do next, because I had the next 20 years of my life all planned out, and but that's what life is, right? It's going to be a constant turn, and just like that, life changes. So if I let that instance create this environment where I can't function, I'm completely unhappy, then that thing wins. So for me, it's always a competition. So I'm like, yeah, screw that car accident. I'm still going to go out there and try to, find my happiness someplace else. So, it's hard, and I know a lot of people that have had to leave aviation because of a medical issue, and none of us plan on it. And that's the other kind of circles back to that blinders on, and thinking this is what you're always going to do. So, what else in your life can make you happy, and how do you find a pathway there? So. I'm sorry to hear that somebody else is dealing with a medical issue. So, yeah, I mean, like I keep saying, you can go ahead and email me, and if you think that you still can find a way back into aviation, I'll help you, try to find a way back in. If not, then bounce some ideas. I'll bounce some ideas off of you and what maybe you could do. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah, I've had that too. I had a medical event about 5 years ago, and so yeah, it's a tricky road. But just like there's people like you. There's also experts in the medical field who can help us guide through it. Sometimes it can be a very tricky process. So organizations like AOPA, they do have people. I think they have former aviation medical examiners who can help us out and give good advice and maybe make the process a little more feasible. And hopefully we get back in the left seat or even right seat.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I just off the record, I talked to a bunch of AMEs, yeah, having an AME is it's a complex thing, right? Because you don't want to tell your AME anything that's wrong with you. So you have
Right.
your regular doctor, and then you have your AME just to get through that medical portion of it. So yeah, I reached out to several different organizations and people that I could just say, hey, and just anonymously ask questions. And yeah, they were
Hmm.
very helpful. So yeah, there are resources out there to, if you do have a medical issue that you think you can get resolved, there are people that can help you through. The rules have changed. People, with having diabetes or previous heart attacks, people are now getting their medicals back. So,
Right.
and even
Yeah.
having color blindness,
Hmm.
you can get over, deal with that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it seems to be a lot more looking at things on a case by case basis now to really see if the person is appropriate to fly rather than, painting with such a broad brush, which if we need pilots, let's get the qualified people back in the plane.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So another question about you personally, did scholarships help you get through the ratings that you needed? So which scholarships, made a difference to you if you got them, and which ones do you think are the most needed for women?
So I actually got a scholarship for college. I would not have been able to finish without the Daniels Fund Opportunity Scholarship here in Denver. So they actually helped me with that. I was lucky that I worked at a general aviation airport, and so I would go wash airplanes and fuel airplanes in exchange for some flight time. And then this program no longer exists. I won't talk about it too much, but it was for the Red Cross. They paid for the airplane for me to fly. I volunteered my time, and I started doing that with. Didn't even have my commercial at that point. They wanted you to have your instrument rating. So after I had just maybe 100 hours, I actually started getting an airplane to fly for free. So I would work all day at the office at the airport, and then I'd put on a snowmobile suit and jump in a single engine airplane in Minnesota, and I would fly to remote airports, and I would pick up blood from blood drives and then fly it to the St. Paul airport, and they would pull the platelets out. So they were on a time limit, and they used us, the 99s, women pilots, to volunteer. I thought it was awesome. I had somebody paying for my airplane. I volunteered my time. So there's a program that wasn't very well advertised, but it's very used by a lot of women pilots to get their time. Unfortunately, that program was shut down. But there we go again. There was networking, and it got me some time. So I don't. It, I look now at all the students and having to figure out how to build up 1,500 hours now. I feel so bad for you guys. So I want to find other ways out there for you, and they exist. So keep your head in, and I hate to say this, in social media, but maybe on the professional platforms to see the conversation. I saw an opportunity to fly dogs around. They helped disperse some of the cost of flying the airplane, and you had to volunteer your time. But that's what you're doing. You're building hours, and it's tough. There's no doubt about it. This is you have to have the ambition and drive, and that's why I'm saying you need your motivation. You need your people around you to keep you going, because you're going to have those moments. I know for me, I had about 800 hours, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to get that next job, and I actually thought about quitting. I went and interviewed at some other jobs, office jobs, and I was going to take one, and I laid there at night trying to visualize what that looked like, working in a cubicle, and I'm like, I just can't. I had to stick in there, but there's dark days. I know it's not an easy path, but the rewards are enormous, and the stories and the experiences are worth the pain and effort. And let other people help you. Let other people give you their experiences. Be willing to listen to their stories so that you can figure out ways to get there yourself. So don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other pilots have gotten there, so learn how they did it. And it won't be the same for you. You're going to have your own path, but let other people put those guideposts up there to help you get there to where you want to be.
You mentioned some great opportunities there about how to build hours. Someone else mentioned skydiving, which is definitely true. And there are so many charitable organizations out there. I think you were talking about Pilots and Paws, and there's PALS and Angel Flight, and there's just so many people. If you can get hold of an airplane, you can do some really good work while also building time. And you mentioned Cape Air before, going in at 500 hours. That's a fantastic outfit. I used to see them up around, Boston, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and they did some great flying. And I've also had some students, they'll actually go work for Google taking pictures. So yeah, so the opportunities are out there, but like you say, you gotta look for them and network.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you have a few more thank yous. Can't wait to read your book. Congratulations on all your success and sharing your experience with us. Your life advice is amazing. And somebody asked, are you currently in 99?
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll mention one more organization that I want you all to go research when we get done here, because you may not have thought about it, but each region of the country has a NBAA, a local chapter. It's the National Business Aviation Association, and they always have some organized events for fundraising. I know here in Denver they have a lot of events. So you don't have to join or anything, but just pay attention to what they're doing at your local airport. So that's another website to just go check out and just see what's going on. And I know COVID right now has derailed everything, but I bet they're starting plans for the summer. I know locally they're planning their golf tournament again, and that's a great place in one day to meet a ton of local corporate pilots. Although I don't play golf, but lots of opportunities like that.
That's true. That's a great idea. So we got about 5 more minutes here. So we had a couple questions about STEM backgrounds and barriers to becoming a pilot. Somebody was actually interested in becoming an astronaut. Now, people I've met that become astronauts usually had engineering backgrounds as well. But can you just talk a little bit more about how STEM can be a barrier in becoming a pilot, or really any career, even military flying?
Yeah, so it's all about perception, and I don't want to say anything bad about STEM, because I love the idea. I love that if you learn those basics of what science, technology, engineering, math, they'll get you anywhere. But it's kind of designed to encourage people and to get people thinking about it. But what I'm seeing is that it's backfiring in a certain element of it. That this perception that if you're not in a STEM program, or if you don't have straight A's, that you can't enter into the aviation industry. I'm telling you right now, like I know a lot of girls say, I don't like math. Well, I hated math. But I tell you what, though, when you start doing common sense applications of math, when you start doing a weight and balance, it makes sense. You are doing something logical. You can look at the results of what you're doing. You're loading an airplane. You're moving passengers from left to right or up and down, and fuel, and understanding how that shift changes makes sense. So our teachers in high school, we start learning all these abstract things and math equations. without understanding that they're trying to get your brains to think in a certain way. But when you come out into the real world, now you get to use that concept for something that is tangible. And I promise you it'll make sense. So, if science and technology is not your strong suit, but aviation is still your passion, you can find your way through learning all of this stuff. There's nothing here you can't learn. It's like drinking out of the fire hose at first, but if you break it down into every little topic, they're all bite-sized pieces. So, you're not expected to learn it all at once. So just little pieces, and it's logical math. Everything's logical. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. It's spot on. So last question we got here, have you ever converted one of your FAA certificates, like your ATP, into one that's been issued by another governmental organization, so a foreign license?
no, I get a ton of foreign EASA questions, and I can't answer them. I can tell you that every time I went to flight safety or Sydney Flight or CAE or any of the training schools, I was always training with foreign flight departments. I always seem to train with German pilots. Their general aviation market and structure is different than ours. They just don't have a strong general aviation industry. So I wish I knew a little bit more about licensing and transferring those licenses over. But unfortunately, I don't know that much about them, and I have not ever flown into another foreign country without being on an N-numbered aircraft. So, we're becoming a much more international world, and the pilot supply could change and shift, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for U.S. pilots to fly in foreign countries. I have a couple of friends that have become expats because they're making $300,000 a year in another country tax-free. So the foreign market is a huge opportunity. They don't have this pilot supply that we do. We're lucky. Most of the other countries don't have it. So if you're willing to go on an adventure like that, yeah, that'd be worth investigating, learning how to transfer your license over to another country.
I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, I tell my students all the time too. China, the Middle East, there's so many emerging markets in Africa right now. So really, if they have that kind of flexibility, just especially after things calm down a little bit, a fantastic opportunity. Now, I'm dating myself here, but the only time I was exploring converting to a European license was when they were the Joint Aviation Authority. So that went out of existence a little while ago now. And so for the people who are asking those questions, I remember that converting an American instrument rating into European one, it's enough to still stick out in my mind all these years later. So that was a tricky step. But like you, Erica, I never got into that. I've never flown an airplane that didn't have N on the tail number, so I can't say either. But there are organizations out there that we could refer you to help with that process if anyone's getting hung up on that. So congratulations, Erica, you got through all the questions. And thank you, everybody. We had such a fantastic audience tonight, even in spite of our many technical problems throughout the country. Erika, I can't thank you enough for being such a wonderful presenter and for everything you do to help other women who are aspiring to become pilots or already are pilots and are looking for new opportunities. So you are always welcome back. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll come back anytime. You let me know, and if you want a different topic, we can talk about that. So
sounds good. And I do the first Wednesday webinar, so I can catch you on there too. So,
yeah, aviation is an endless source of stories and conversations. So yeah, let's keep it going. And I love that you guys are doing this and getting together, at least online, and opening up that communication. That's half the battle.